1, 2, 3, 4. I told you so. I told you. I told you so. I told you. Remember when I told you about 9/11? Remember when I told you about Building 7? Remember when I told you about the fluoride in the water? Yes, I did. Remember when I told you about the New World Order? Remember that? Remember when I told you about the chemtrails in the sky? Remember when I told you that NASA was full of lies? Remember when I told you about the ultra mind control? Well, I just want to say that I told you so, yeah.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this special show here in ESH News. We haven't been broadcasting for a couple of weeks, but I'm really happy to host this guest that joined me for this edition of ESH News. Hello Sven, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Nia. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm very well, how are you?
I'm good, pretty good, and well set and ready for this show. We got a lot of interesting content to speak about. But first of all, I kind of like glad that I got to know you. We kind of like bumped into each other in all sorts of like occasions in the last 1 or 2 years. But over the last month, I got to know you through the Facebook pages and your YouTube channel. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to invite you over here to ESH News. And for you, to share your knowledge, information, and whatever, messages you want to put for loyal viewers. So let's start off with, a little bit of introduction. And of course, we did the greetings part, I think. So about you, Sven, just a little bit about where you're located. And let's talk a little bit also about the things that you did since your awakening and all the activities that you've been participating in the last 2-3 years or so.
Okay. Well, I live in the south coast of England in a town called Bournemouth, which is about an hour and a half or something drive away from London. And I've lived here now for about 5 years, 6 years. Before that, I lived in Germany pretty much since I left college back in 1992, showing my age now. What I did was I did a scholarship and went over to Germany in 1992 and worked with a German chemical company. And I pretty much spent most of my adult life in Germany, came back here a few years ago for personal reasons. And during my return to England really is when I kind of experienced my big part of my waking up in terms of, well, particularly a couple of subjects. One of them was the shape of the earth. And then, of course, once you've cracked that, as it were, then the other stuff becomes very obvious very quickly, whatever it is that goes on, That's my experience. So I'm really condensing this story down. But so about 1.5 years ago, I partook in the Globe Light Tour, for example. That was a great opportunity for me to meet like-minded people. And also not only...
Okay, so a little bit about what is the Globe Light Tour. And I actually followed that. But for our viewers, I guess.
Yeah, the Globe Light Tour was an initiative started off by friends. I'm glad to call them friends now anyway, here in the UK. And what they did was they basically bought a camper van, got lots of different people, different content creators to sort of sponsor some stickers that went on the side of them, like Globebusters and DITRH and Journalism and lots of other people, Mark Sargent, Paul on the Plane, whatever. And we plastered the van, or they plastered the van with all these stickers. And then we they set off from the UK back in 2019 from a town called Kidderminster. And the long and short of it is, there was a European tour that was done, about 39 countries, over 18,000 miles. and took just over 3 months. And my stint on there was altogether about 5 weeks. It was 2 stints, so I did 2.5 weeks or so. Then I came back to England, and then I went back for the final stint, which was Scandinavia. But the good thing about the tour was that it wasn't about just showing that it's possible to get round, because it was mainly funded by donations, but also you gave an opportunity to see what people were really thinking about these sorts of topics. And the only way you're going to do that is to get on the street and talk to people. You can have online communities all day long if you want, but at the end of the day, the real message and the reality of life is out there. That's where it's happening. So when we talk about echo chambers, we were trying to break that echo chamber thing by doing this tour, and the tour I felt was a massive success. So that's what the Global Eye tour was. And then we were going to do a Southwest UK uni tour in April of last year, and of course all this nonsense
started
to that, so
yeah. Okay, cool. And I think that you also been involved. First of all, about the Global Eye tour, I remember following your tour through Roxanne's report over in the van, and it was quite lovely. I was very touched, by the actual thing that you said about the activism over the streets and meeting the real people. And for me personally, the quest of flat smacking is I think it was more popular in a year ago with me, but whenever I get this opportunity, I always find it first of all, a good way to spend time, with friends and new people that you meet, and just explain it about them. And second of all, it's it gives you some kind of feeling of a journey, a quest that you are involved in, with explaining those things, and I do think it's really important. And besides that, I know that you also been involved with all kinds of content creating over the network. I personally saw in the last few months that you've been publishing these news reports. Tell us a little bit about these activities.
Yeah. So what happened was I got involved last year quite heavily with the stand-up community, who were doing a lot of planning in terms of demonstrations, rallies, that sort of thing, meetups.
Stand-up X, right?
Yes. And again, an initiative to try and spread the word as well as connect with like-minded people, because I think that's vital in a lot of this stuff, is that in order for you not to go totally nuts, it's important that you keep like-minded people around you, reminding each other about what this is all about. Because I don't know about you, Nir, but I often question myself quite often about all of this and think to myself, am I on the right track here? Is it me that's going mad? Is everyone else right? Am I missing something? So you need those people to bounce off, to then be able to say to yourself, yeah, actually, no, we are right. Come on, this is all nonsense. Something has to be done about it. Now, we're all realistic enough to know that we're not going to change the world. I'm not going to convert the masses, but you can plant some seeds here or there. You can get a message out. You can make a name for yourself, create a little bit of noise. And that was the whole idea behind that. It wasn't, we weren't thinking of the latest version of the French Revolution or anything like that. That was never going to happen. But it was about getting a message out and also gaining a bit of satisfaction of the fact that we're doing something. If I just sit at home and do nothing and watch all of this unfold around me, then what am I doing? And doing nothing is not an option. And this is something I've always said. There's always something someone can do. It doesn't have to be go on the street and shout at the top of their voice. There are many ways to skin a cat, as the saying goes.
Yeah, I think that also in the previous show that we had over here with Stefan from Germany, we mentioned a lot this psychological, let's say, help, that and support that you need as a truther throughout the way, because you are bumping into all kinds of situations that you are having, feuds with your family and friends about these topics. And I think that among each other, among the truthers, there's a lot of place of supporting each other with the opinions and giving the right feeling that there's someone who understands your thing, that you're not alone, and you are So I think it's also like a very worthy cause to input your time with, just to help your fellow truthers, and and support them in those times, because there are these moments that you tell to yourself, is it all worth it? Okay, especially now with all kinds of censorships and all kinds of police involvement and things like that. It's very you're asking yourself, why I'm doing this, and is it all worth it? But there is, of course, a value to all of this, because you know that you are dealing with, I guess, the truth, and the truth is the most important thing, I guess. Would you agree?
I agree. Although the word truth can be overrated sometimes, right?
Okay.
We have to, when we talk about truth, it's a very sort of, it's one of those words. What does that even mean? But I think it's important to, first of all, get your facts right on anything that you want to talk about. Make sure that you know, I'll put it another way. But in the last few years, I've noticed with myself anyway, that the more I feel I know, the more I come to the realization that I know absolutely nothing, in fact. And that realization is what made me realize, I guess, I'd probably fail in my English class if I was tested on my English right now. That we have to unlearn so much, and so you've got the process of unlearning so much combined with gaining knowledge, I guess, and at the same time trying to stay spiritually well equipped enough to be able to deal with all the nonsense as well that you're confronted with on a daily basis, whether it be the headlines that there's no escaping from, whether you have a television or not, doesn't matter, because you'll hear it in a shop, because some shop will have a radio on, or you'll hear someone talking about it, or you'll see people walking around dressed in certain ways that will remind you of it all the time, and all that sort of thing. The fact that you can't act normally because of all the restrictions in place and all that stuff. So to be able to cope with all of that, yeah, there are many things going on in my mind, and that can become quite a challenge. And then, so hence coming back to the original point of keeping like-minded people around you, that's where that becomes vitally important. Otherwise, you will feel alone very quickly in all of this, and then it will just peter out into nothing. And then they will have achieved what they want to achieve anyway, which is total, unequivocal control.
I think that you mentioned earlier about unlearning, okay, about losing all the stuff that you kind of like learned throughout the years, and they were apparently wrong in some sense. I know that also like relates to the flat Earth that you mentioned earlier, or like the globe lie. The thing is, it has kind of like a nostalgic sense of it, okay? Because I think that once you are like encounter with this truth, you're kind of like getting back in time to your childhood, to all those times that you had these questions, and someone came over to you and provided you the answer. And this answer wasn't really sufficient for you at the moment, but you told to yourself, "Oh, I'm a little kid. What do I know? Probably this guy is right." And this kind of like this answer that he gave you became the truth of your reality, okay, in the time. So I think that there is something really nostalgic in this moment, that you are getting back to those childhood questions, like, about the gravity, and maybe about, why they don't see things upside down in Australia, or why is the sun moving, and all kinds of like questions like that you keep coming back to them, and you are like viewing them in a whole new perspective. So I think that this kind of like moment of nostalgia, and kind of like combines with your truthers awakening. I want us to tell to tell the viewers a little bit about your awakening story. How did that happen? How did that unfold? What was like the process or the steps that you kind of like remember from this? I call it the awakening honeymoon or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it didn't happen for me until quite late on. I'm 48 in 2 days' time, actually. So I was brought. The reason why I say that is not to get premature birthday greetings, but because
you will,
because it puts it into perspective.
Yeah.
Again, how much I have to unlearn, and that's why that point is so important. So I grew up in a military family, for example. My father was in the British Army for over 22 years. and I'm half German because my mother's German. A lot of British troops were based in Germany back in the day, or West Germany as it was called back then, when the so-called Cold War was at its height. And so we were part of a setup called the British Army of the Rhine, BAOR was their abbreviation. And they were basically mainly tanks and such like, based along the West German countryside, facing the Soviets, as it were. But so you can imagine my upbringing was very pro-British, rule Britannia, God save the Queen, etc., etc., etc. So you didn't have much scope for any awake thoughts at all. It was, you know, the schools were military, everything was military, military, military. I mean, I had some German friends because my mum's German, so I grew up with two languages, with two kind of mentalities. So I was one of the few British kids who mixed with the German kids. We lived in Germany, but still our upbringing was very rigid, very military. The reason why I'm saying that is that to become awake later on in life is quite a challenge, because you have to, you know, you've got to get rid of all that stuff, all that indoctrination, as it were. And that takes a bit of time. And even when 9/11 happened, just to speed the story up a little bit, even when 9/11 happened, for example, in 2001, I was working in Hamburg at the time in Germany for a company called Merkel Freudenberg. And I didn't even know, I know now, but back then when I was working for them, I didn't even click. They used to, their claim to fame is they manufacture O-rings. And one of their biggest contracts was with NASA. Right. Anyway, I digress. So what was I saying? So even 9/11 didn't wake me up straight away. That didn't happen. I didn't wake up to that until about 2007, maybe even 2008. So, and by that, and in between that time, 2005, we had the 7/7 bombings in London. You know, the famous picture of the double-decker bus with the roof peeled off, with Tavistock written on it. I mean, you look at it now, it's so obvious, right? But at the time when it happened, it wasn't obvious. It was like those naughty Arabs again, those bad, naughty Muslims again, and all that. You know, I bought into all of that because I was still in my British Army way of thinking, because that indoctrination worked until well into my 30s, you know. But then around about 2007, 2008, I started looking at 9/11 much more closely, and it became very clear very quickly. And then from then on in, pretty much I looked at that for a long time, and I started looking at false flags in general. So things like Operation Gladio and a lot of the Northern Ireland stuff, for example, that after doing quite a bit of researching, a lot of it becomes clear that a lot of those events were false flag events. And there's lots of other things there. You had a similar thing in Germany called the RAF, which was the Rote-Armee Fraktion, they were called. And that they were also kind of semi-sponsored by the state. You guys had the whole PLO thing going down, and there were, you know, there were lots of things going on all around Europe to keep people on their toes, as it were. But that all came clear to me kind of at the end of the 2000s, so 2008, 9, 10-ish is when that sort of happened. Flat Earth didn't hit me until 2015, 16. And now I'm here.
Usually flat earth is used, at least for me it was like that, flat earth is kind of like the gateway to get all the other conspiracies or whatever, because flat earth...
It knits it all together, right? It pieces it all together. When you got the flat earth thing in place, then you kind of realize, okay, that explains a lot. It explains NASA, it explains this, it explains that, it explains it's almost like an organic sort of organic gluttony of the state, or of this machine that needs our energy, our money, our resources. Constantly, it's pulling from us, it's pulling us, it's dragging us, it's draining us all the time.
And mainly, I think that mainly is about the recognition that there is a big lie, which is presented in our world, which is now present, and people are not aware of this lie. And I think that leads you to all the other lies that you kind of like seeing on the media, and you can't stay numb or silent after you get awakened to this one. For me, for example, I came from I came to Flat Earth through my media experience. Like I knew after I finished my media studies, I kind of like knew that there's lots of like false things going on in the media, and there's like a certain frame that you can't really penetrate through regarding reflection of the truth. And the minute and after that, I used to see a lot of like movies about NASA's activity, about the stars, about like history. Ancient aliens was very fond of my one of my hobbies to see and to talk about. And the minute that someone told me that I'm watching, cartoons for the last 15 or 20 years, this is the moment that I told that my ego kind of like hurt real bad, because I told myself, okay, just a second, I'm like the media expert, so I need to recognize whenever I see, cartoons in front of me and it's not true. And I came over to check that again, and I saw that, it's actually is cartoons, and why do they show us cartoons? And I guess this is because of they have a big lie to cover over there.
Well, I was lucky because I managed to. I actually met Paul on the plane back in Kidderminster when we had the UK convention, for example, for the Global Eye Tour. The reason why I'm mentioning him is because he broke it down as to the fakery of the footage. Like the box around the blue marble picture, and how you can see the photoshopping and everything else if you use the correct forensics for it. And it's quite easy to detect if you have the software. I don't have that software to look that up, and I'm not an expert in it, but there are people out there who are very knowledgeable about breaking that down, and he being one of them.
It's a very honorable guest on our shows. He was right here last month.
Fabulous guy. Yeah, I enjoyed meeting him. I'd like to meet him again. Actually, really nice guy, definitely. And I learned a lot from him and many of those guys in the community as well. There's knowledge that I found out that I would never learn at school. I never learned about parallax in school. I learned about perspective in art class, but perspective was never mentioned in science.
Yeah.
Gravity and ball-shaped planets were mentioned in science. Nobody talked about perspective, which of course explains a lot of stuff. And all that sort of thing. And that's what I mean about unlearning. It's like I think that's why a lot of people find it difficult to get their heads around stuff, because it just doesn't equate to their norm. And that's a big issue for a lot of people.
I think that it's kind of like related to the big assignment that you got once you realize there's a lie over here. The actual separation between whatever which is outer source knowledge, meaning like everything you got from the media, family, friends, the internet, books, whatever you got like from outer source, to separate this part to the part which is things that you learn by your senses and by your personal experience in life. And those kind of things, you're saying to yourself, okay, I'm done like 30, 40 years out of my life to look at it in the way that people told me how to look. And I will try to look at it with my own senses and to see what I'm getting. And then you're like revealing really astonishing things. I think that,
that's true. And of course, you've got the added challenge that when you do start changing your ways, though, and you do start changing your outlooks and everything else, and you go through that awakening process, certainly this is my experience, those around you who are normally used to you in a certain way, they see a change in you, and it becomes difficult for them to handle because they're still stuck in that mindset. So that's another challenge that we have to contend with. People, friends, colleagues, whatever, acquaintances.
It brings out a certain kind of aggression from their side.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think it goes to the aggressive side in that sense?
Well, this is I think that's the $64,000 question. I think this is the key to everything at the moment, is why are people, because what you're talking about now equates to right now as well. Is why we're in this situation right now, right? Without people's compliance, this would not be possible, what's happening right now. So the question that has to be asked is, how can you dupe the whole population that easily? What is going on that makes people just flip and buy it like that? And yet when I talk to somebody and say, for example, let's use a global eye analogy. For example, well, you can see too far. Let's just use a very simple one. because you can see too far. You can explain it to them. You can say, look, you can bring a ship back on from the horizon using a binoculars or using a P900 or whatever. It's no problem. You can see well beyond the distance that you should be allowed to see if you use the shape of the Earth as we're told. You can give them that proof. You can show them it. It won't sink in. It won't. There's a non-acceptance. There's a non-willingness to all of this, and that's a real problem. So it's not even about us being right or wrong. It's about how can we communicate to even get an opportunity to pass some sort of message on or to have that dialogue with somebody. Because at the moment, the shutters are very, very much down. You know, you're getting more and more divide all the time. You know, fast forward it to now, you have those who have been vaccinated. There's a division there. There's a division on the street every day with people who will or won't wear face masks. There's a division amongst parents in terms of, I'm not having my kid tested, never mind vaccinated. Then you've got all this nonsense going on. And it's like, you know, it's just a massive mess, all of it.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, the machine is rolling.
Yeah, I think that the critical war over here is the same. If you mentioned the COVID crisis, we'll talk about it later on. But you can clearly see that this crisis or this lie which is going on right now is very similar or very pretty much the continuation, okay, of the globe lie, because it's all concerned around science, okay, about for you accepting and complying that science got the true reflection of reality, okay? When science, the way that I personally define it, lots of people really bashed me about this definition. Science is actually just a language, okay? Yeah. It's not really, it's a language like the Hebrew language, like the English language. It's the way that you kind of like choose to describe this reality, but it's not the reality itself. And I think that the whole war right now, which is happening, is about people stressing really stressed that you will comply with this science, because I think that two things kind of like it reached to a critical point that also like politics and the media got very weakened in the last centuries, okay? First of all, lots of people are like seeing through the lies of politics, and you can choose the lie in politics. You can say that politicians don't keep up with their promises. You can say that politicians don't really represent the people that elected them, or you can say that this whole thing is like fixed and a smoke screen that kind of like comes to devote us from what is really happening, because real and important issues are not discussed in politics like we have in the moment.
They're not supposed to be discussed in politics, because politics has a particular function that many people are not aware of. Everybody goes around saying never trust a politician, and yet everybody believes it when they start talking on the television about deadly viruses. Now, you can't have it both ways. Either you believe them or you don't believe them. You can't just cherry pick what you fancy. Well, you can, I suppose, but it's not the way to go, right?
Of course.
So,
it's the same thing. In this point, it's the same thing that goes on here with the COVID thing, with the vaccinations lately. People are got very critical about the government giving all the restrictions throughout the year from one hand, but once they got the vaccinations from the same government, okay, vaccinations are okay. This is perfectly fine, and we're gonna take it. Okay, so again, it's this contradiction in their opinion, in the process that kind of like thinking. And the other side of it, okay, of the side that got weakened throughout the last centuries, is about the media, I think, because people understood that they can get to their own sources of knowledge, to create their own content, and to get all the real news that they want, by the social networks. And the thing is that the media kind of like really stressed out about this, because they're going to lose their part, their role, their control over this, what they want to project as reality. So I think that this crisis came to shake a lot of like processes that kind of like started a few years ago, and to give the governments back their control power, and the media as as an honorable body that kind of like reflects reality properly. And I think, and this is why they call us fake news, I guess.
Well, I mean, we can go into that after the break or whatever. You know, we had our experiences with the media here in Bournemouth when we did our demonstrations, and I did some videos on it, how the police are clearly in cahoots, working together with the media, the local media, and also national media. It is clear. And we have proof of that because our particular demonstration got a special mention in London in Downing Street a few weeks ago by one of the police commissioners. So that, you know, they're trying their best to push out this agenda and using whatever methods possible and whatever dirty tactics they want to use, and whether they want to assassinate some characters along the way, in that sense, not physically, although I wouldn't put that past them either. You know, they're all methodology is on the table for them, and they won't hesitate if it means clamping down and making sure that this continues to roll forward. And it is, as we see, as we can see, you know.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that we're going to talk a little bit later on about the media effects on the general public and how she does it. And we're going to mention a few historical issues, but I think that we're going to go for a short break. We're going to play out one of the songs that I actually watched that you published over on your Facebook page, which is kind of like based on a Major Tom song, and kind of like reflects really well of what is happening with the world right now, people, right? Okay, so let's do a little bit of a short break and we'll come back right soon.
Great, see you in a minute.
Mind control for everyone. Mind control for everyone. Take your Pfizer pill, put your face nappy on. Mind control for everyone. Commencing lockdown COVID scam. Check cognition as COVID replace the flu. This is mind control for everyone. We've really all been played, as the papers tell us worship billionaires. Are you following the program and don't care? This is Boris Johnson mind control, like 1984. They're now bloating in a most peculiar way, as the world looks very different today. Are we living through a big scam? All across the world, COVID is just flu, not what they've been telling you. Mind control.
telling you. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our show. Hoping that you enjoyed the clip over here. And we are here with Sven and his cup of tea in the UK. And we're gonna talk now a little bit about British tea, maybe? No? Yeah, perhaps later about the British tea. We got also similar opinions about this matter. But we wanted to talk a little bit about our history and about not only like the current global lie that we are witnessing at the moment, but also about I think, and also not about the COVID, of course, but maybe other things in our past, in our history, our familiar modern history that kind of like have their conspiracies side within them. And I'm talking about all kinds of like happenings of the major occurrences in the world, like World War II, the Cold War, the last war that we saw, like the last 20 or 40 years, 20, 30 years were like about the war on terror. And now we got like a whole shipment of like war against an invisible virus, I guess. So, and all these variants that they keep popping up every day. So tell us a little bit, Sven, how do you see this history unfolds, and what do you think about all kinds of like things that happened maybe in the past, but now is also like relevant because we can see the lie that is kind of like go through them.
I think if you look back at the timeline of history, and you only have to go back, let's say 100 years, maybe just over 100 years. I'm really touching on the subject here. We're not going in deep. Then you'll see there are always pockets of the timeline where major things have happened. So you were mentioning World War II and you were mentioning the Cold War. Well, if we even go before that a little bit, that sets it all up for what comes after that. So we go back to, let's say, World War I, and we go back to, let's say, 1913, actually, and the Federal Reserve Act in the US. That kind of, for me personally, having looked at it a little bit more closely, kicks off what comes after. So you have the, for example, the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, the outbreak of World War I in 1914, which was caused by some sort of guy getting shot in the back of his car in Sarajevo, a guy called Franz Ferdinand, right? Which of course is, again, it's nonsense. You're not going to start a world war because some guy gets shot on the street. Then of course you have the Balfour Declaration, which happens in the middle of World War I. Then you have the Spanish flu, which breaks out in 1918, right at the end of World War I. So you have pretty much a few significant events that happen all in the space of 5 years of each other. I mean, according to the World Bank, for example, what we're going through right now is a 5-year project. We have documents to prove it. So they like their fives. You used to have the 5-year plan, the Marshall Plan, and all that sort of stuff. It was always groups of 5, 5, 5, 5, right? Yeah. So fast forward from World War I into World War II. Let's not worry too much about who is behind these wars, because we can speculate until the cows come home. We're never really going to know that. But we do know that not what we're told is necessarily what actually really happened. I'm not saying there weren't any wars. Of course there were wars, but the reasons behind it aren't, the official narrative never equates to the reality. We're always fed something totally different. The whole idea of that's to keep people divided, keep people fighting each other, keep people busy, occupied, distracted, whatever. But
I kind of like heard a presumption lately that the Second World War was pretty much like the actual war, the actual forces that were like moving them are more planted in more ancient times and about like more ancient races of like two different sides, the Aryans and the Tartarians and all kinds of like presumptions like that. That it's not necessarily was like about the formation of countries or states that were like having this war, but more like ancient races, ancient wars that we already had in very ancient history. Have you heard about this?
I've heard a bit about that, and I'm not too sure, to be absolutely honest. But one thing I can say is that it's not very difficult to scrub history from people. It only takes a generation or 2 or 3 maximum to restart something and be unaware of what happened before. You know, you can re-manifest, I guess, the course of history at a drop of a hat. You know, you can rewrite it as history's going along. I don't know what happened before World War II. I wasn't around, and most people who were around then won't know much because they're either very old or they would have been little children. So we don't know much apart from the documentation that we've given in the form of video, and there wasn't much of that, or photography, which, as we know, can be faked, can be doctored. They do it all the time. I mean, if you believe photographs, then you believe we landed on the moon. If you believe video footage, you believe we just landed on Mars, right? Video is no proof of anything. Photos are no proof of anything. And again, these are the simple things that you have to get into people's minds for them to understand, not to simply believe what they're shown or what they're told, but to go and verify and observe for themselves. But that becomes impossible if the events were so far back. So you rely on those history books. And, you know, as the old saying goes, it's the victors that write the history books. And I guess that's what's meant by that. What was really behind World War II? I don't really know. Did the Rothschilds and all those people finance it? Probably, but I don't know. I don't have any proof of that either. It makes sense when you look at where we're at now and we look at what's happened all the way since, keeping people in this perpetual state of fear and anger and frustration and everything else. You know, when we look at the Cold War, for example, I know we're jumping back and forth a little bit, but it's the same sort of thing. Was there really a threat from the Soviets? Was there a nuclear arms race at all? I don't know. We were told there was, but whether there was or not, I have no idea. My dad would tell me yes, because he'll tell me I served in the British Army at that time, so I know. Well, no, he doesn't know. How does he know? You know, just because you were serving in the military doesn't necessarily mean that you know what was going on behind the scenes or at higher levels. You know, just because you work at NASA doesn't mean to say that you know that whatever you're working on goes up into space. You don't know that. It's compartmentalization. It's a classic way of keeping people under control on a need-to-know basis. You know,
you kind of like mentioned the nuclear weapon. Okay, the nuclear weapon. Quite recently, there is a claim that you know, since the atom, the actual object of an atom was never seen by anyone. Okay, it's too small, and so it kind of like comes to question about the whole successful development of atomic bomb, okay, and about nuclear bomb, and if that comes to true that the atomic bomb never really existed, okay, and it was just you know, a big heavy TNT were bombed in Japan back then the whole current, okay, nuclear struggle that we got right now maybe isn't really as well, okay, which this one has a major, you know, major effects on our life, okay, in this whole nuclear race and what we got with Iran right now and all kinds of things like that. What if all of this wasn't true? Okay, this could have you know, major and this is the thing that they always like keeps intimidating with, okay, this fear of like atomic weapons and nuclear weapons and things like that. So what if this fear wasn't justified as well? It's kind of like it will, I think, blow the minds of people if they will if they will believe it, okay. And because this was in the middle of the thing with the Cold War, and I guess that the Cold War, as you mentioned it, did finish without any you know, single gunshot between the United States and Russia, and kind of like end in the end of the 80s, and since then we got like a new war going on right now, and I think that the common thing is that the enemy keeps being vague, okay, keep being not really physical, okay. First it was like a Cold War, which is not really a war, And now we got like over starting of the 90s and for the last 30 years or so, we got like a war on terror, which terror is also like an unseen, enemy, an unseen soldier. It could be anywhere, it could be anyone, whatever, right?
Well, we used to, there was a thing called the phony war in the UK, and that was in World War II, for example. And what it was they were telling people, for example, I don't know if you knew this, but I looked this up a little while ago. There were demonstrators back in World War II, just like we were demonstrating about the lockdowns and stuff. They were going out on the streets talking about how their cities were not being bombed at all, like the British media were telling everybody that we were being bombed at night and all this. In actual fact, there were people going out on the streets demonstrating about it, saying, no, we're not being blitzed at all. We haven't been hit by bombs, by German bombs at night. They're just using that as an excuse for us to shut down our electricity and to have our blackouts at night, because you had to have a blackout in the evenings. They were telling all the cities to switch all their lights off, stay indoors. Where have we heard that before? Stay indoors, right? And all that sort of stuff. So the phony war, the lies within lies within lies, was going on all the time. So then raises the question automatically, well, how real was that war really? I'm not saying people didn't get killed or anything like that. Of course, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is the bigger picture behind it all. What was really going on there? Was this really simply a war between good and evil, like President W. Bush had us believe that it was us against the axis of terror?
It's more like Reagan, I think, right?
Yeah.
It was Reagan, I think.
Sorry?
It was Reagan, President Ronald Reagan, that kind of like declared it about the war between good and evil.
Oh, he did it as well. They've all come up with the narrative. I mean, after 9/11, George W. talked about either you're with us or you're with the terrorists, right? Remember?
Yeah,
he did all those sorts of speeches, and it was all that sort of narrative. And it was the same in World War II. If you didn't believe the narrative, the British narrative, you were automatically a Nazi. You were automatically one of the bad guys. Now, fast forward to now, if you go on a demonstration, or if you say I'm exempt from wearing a face mask, like here in the UK, for example, straight away, you're one of the bad people. You're one of the dangerous people. You're one of the people who are putting everybody else at risk. And because of you not complying, we have to endure all these measures. We have to go through all this hardship, etc., etc. So you've got that perpetual rollout of dividing society. And that's the trick, is the divide and conquer factor in all of this. And they use different methods. They've used different methods throughout history. It will be a world war. It will be some sort of financial implosion somewhere. It will be some sort of religious-backed issue that's going down. It will be a natural disaster. You wait and see. It will be aliens next. You know.
I'm expecting.
You heard it here first. But I'm telling you, that will be the next rollout. We just had a headline in England 2 days ago that a meteorite was seen flying across Northern Europe, and apparently some of the fireball stones landed in England somewhere. So there were people going out hunting for bits of this meteorite that apparently allegedly shot through the skies of Northern Europe. So they're beefing up, they're ramping up this whole outer space narrative. We just had the Mars rover thing and all that sort of stuff. And so it's all preparing the ground for the next event to then try and unify mankind, as it were, which is what Reagan spoke about back in the UN back in 1984, I think it was, when he talked about how, just imagine if the whole world got together and there was an alien invasion and all that sort of stuff. And you're thinking to yourself, what is this guy on about? You know, I was 11 back then, so I didn't understand. I understand now, but I didn't understand then.
Yeah, I think
and you can see it happening.
Yeah, I think that collaboration is also like happening with the media on that aspect, with the Hollywood movies. Okay, that we keep saying that that they are turning into reality. Whatever was like a movie 15, 20 years ago, suddenly it's reality right now. And
they did it with the moon landings, Nia.
Yeah.
You know, a year before the moon landings, they brought out the film 2001: A Space Odyssey. They've always perfected this thing about making that overlap between reality and science fiction. and essentially giving a lot of people nowhere to go, but they'll mix the two together. And like you just rightly said, it becomes people's reality. There are so many examples.
Yeah, of course. And let's keep on forward to our current example. And I want to speak a little bit about the COVID crisis that we've been experiencing lately. You can call it whatever name you want: COVID crisis, COVID lie, COVID hoax, whatever. The thing is that first of all the truthers that were back then involved with this crisis began, especially all the flat earthers. They immediately say, hey, it's the same thing. We're seeing the same scenario, the same characters, the same people, the same plot is being applied, and it's all based on control. Okay, on about this time it kind of developed from only mind control, but also to a physical control on our body, on our soul, on our I don't know what else they got into control the last year. I'm telling people, if the COVID stops tomorrow morning there's no more COVID, okay, it will take years and years to just to get the people's minds back at what was beforehand, okay, to erase all the psychological damage that was done throughout the last year, okay. Forget about the financial or whatever damage that was done. But I want to ask you personally, Sven, first of all, how this crisis got you, okay, in which state of mind, and what did you think of at the beginning of it? And let's start with that.
Okay, well, I just came off the Global Eye Tour in December 2019 when the whole COVID thing started gaining traction. And back in January of last year, 2020, January, February, I started looking at it a bit more closely. We started hearing all this stuff about China and blah, 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 blah. And I started doing one or two shows about it with a friend of mine who lives in America. And we were talking about this at great detail, but we were also falling for it in terms of, well, first of all, is it a thing at all? Then isn't it a thing? Then is it, how did it all start? And there were rumors about it started with this, a guy in a lab. Then it was someone else was talking about someone being bitten by a monkey, that classic, and all this sort of thing. But what I did notice very early on was the fact that there were a lot of conflicting stories being put out there by the media. And this seems to be a trait. This seems to be something that happens all the time, that they just throw out loads of different versions and just let people assume and speculate. And while all that speculation is going on, they continue with the motion of rolling out the whole event. And in the early stages last year, when the first lockdown came back in March of last year, I took it in my stride. I wasn't too fussed about it because it wasn't changing much in my life, really, because my life at that time, the lockdown per se didn't really affect me. What I was doing was not affected by the lockdown. But the longer it was going on, the more I was getting concerned that people were actually not waking up to this at all. In fact, it seemed to be getting worse. And suddenly I started seeing people wearing masks on the street, which I wasn't seeing at the beginning of the year, but I was starting to see that towards April and May and June, towards the summertime as well. And that was when I was starting to really get a bit worried about, well, what if the majority are going to just stick with this? Then we've got nowhere to go. We're going to have a real problem here. So that was my thoughts for it last year. I was quite concerned. And so I decided to then take action and get involved with the Stand Up X group. And I started going on demos and filming a lot of them and that sort of thing. And, and doing things like trying to go to London on demos. And we had a very famous incident that went viral where we were stuck on a coach and the police behaved atrociously, and there will be consequences to that action by the police. That's not over yet, that story. But and we came to the realization that this isn't about the virus anyway. Our human rights are being stripped and taken from us on a daily basis. You can't even walk down the street without wearing a face mask, without people looking at you in a funny way. Every time I go either on a bus or in a shop, I have to hold a conversation with somebody explaining why I'm not wearing one. So it's not, and the frustrating thing is these people are not bad people. They're just misinformed. They don't have the correct information because they're getting their information from the mainstream media, which is what we spoke about earlier. It's very easy to keep people on a one-track mind in all of this, and it's easy to control. The media, it's so simple for them. But
out of all the things that you've mentioned over here, and maybe some that you didn't mention, throughout the last year, we witnessed, the mask thing that you mentioned, and the quarantines, and the isolation, self-isolation, and of course, social distancing, and of course, all the economical things that the government implemented on us. So, out of all those things, what is personally just got to you, personally? Just you felt it really bad, oh, this thing is gonna destroy us, out of all the, things that I mentioned or not mentioned?
That's a really good question. I think one of the things that struck home to me the hardest was how there's a massive emphasis at keeping your distance from other people. They don't want you to communicate too much. They don't want you to interact with each other. All this nonsense about staying 2 meters away, wearing face masks, which is a sign of submission anyway. Well, the 2 meter thing is significant in the spiritual world because your aura consists of about 6 feet. So anything outside of that 6 feet is outside of your aura. Now, I think that the powers that be, of course, know all about this, and it plays into the hands of the whole agenda. They want to keep people distanced from each other. They want to go up the nose into your third eye to do the PCR testing. Why would you go up someone's nose into the pineal gland and test them in the frontal lobe of their brain when every other test that you get done, any swab for any disease, is taken elsewhere, either urine tests, blood samples, mouth swabs, whatever. Nobody ever goes up your nose. So why are they doing it this time? And there's all these sorts of things that scare me to death because I can see it's so abnormal. This is not about, it cannot be about a virus. It's impossible to be about a virus. So then I have to ask myself the question, well, how do I stay sane in all of this? And how do I keep on track and not worry and be scared too much? And that's my biggest challenge. And I think that's the challenge we all have, about staying spiritually fit and keeping like-minded people around you and all that sort of thing. But even then, with like-minded people, there are different types of people. Just because somebody, it's like the flat earth, right? Just because somebody believes in a flat earth doesn't mean to say they're good for you. They can still be toxic, so you have to be a little bit choosy and a little bit selective around that. But for me, it's the distancing, their emphasis on us distancing each other from each other and wearing these stupid masks. That for me is very, very telling that there's more going on here, that there's definitely a spiritual thing going down here. It's not just about keeping people out of their jobs or whatever. You can do that differently. You can just shut all you can just pull the economic plug and have all the companies shut down and nobody would go to work. That's not what's going on here. That's also going on, but I think it's this bigger picture of keeping people distanced from each other, getting rid of that spiritual fabric, trying to wear it down.
I kind of reflects us that this is not really an earthly war, what we're witnessing at the moment. Okay, this is not a war between people or maybe like on the ground. It's kind of like a reflection of what we are, what we know from the great stories about a war between good and evil, about collision of opposite forces, and what we're seeing over here is that the reflection of it. Are you agreeing with that perception?
Yeah. I would agree with that. Absolutely.
Okay. Anyway, and I think that if we do talking about the forces of good and evil and whatever, I think that we can define it, okay, in some way by all kinds of terms, okay, of who's standing behind this, or what kind of weapon they're using. Let's say we all know we have the good side and the bad side, okay. It's quite I don't know, understandable. Also, it comes out from maybe the perception, which stands in the basic of all conspiracies or whatever. Okay, it all comes down to the question of if there's a coincidence in our world, okay, or there is a process of reason and result, okay. If you are relying, okay, that there is like coincidence in the world and in the world, and there are like laws of nature that they are just like that, and you have like evolution and things like that happens, no particular reason, it just happens, okay, like that. So this is one side, okay. And if you on the other side is like, if you believe that there is a reason to everything, okay, and if you see a building, okay, it wasn't made out of nothing. It wasn't like a pile of bricks that the wind kind of like assembled as a building. There were like builders that came over and built this building. So in the same way, we have a God, which is the initial reason to it all, and from there he created things from like apparent reason, and with like really certain plan that he worked with. So
Well,
yeah.
I think it's a good point that you're making. For me, it took the Global Eye Tour for me to wake up to the fact that we live in a creation. We don't live in an accident. There are too many beautiful things for this to be an accident. And I think because of that beauty, and because I think people were slowly waking up to that, because that's the feedback I was getting on the Global Eye Tour, for example, that people on the street were actually listening to us, and we had some really, really good interactions with people. I think that this reset or this agenda or these events that are going on at the moment, they're not happening by accident. I think that is all coinciding with the fact that there was a little bit of an awakening wave happening amongst people in general. And I think what's happened here has come at a timely time for the ones who don't want us to be spiritual and to understand what's going on. I was never a religious person in that sense. I was brought up a Catholic, a Roman Catholic. I went to church as a kid and everything else, but the last time I went to church was when I got married. Back in 2007. So I'm not a particularly religious person, but that's not to say I don't think there are powers, higher powers at work here that we can't explain. And here's a question I have for any science freak or pseudoscientist, is that why would you want to necessarily know everything about everything? I mean, why can't we just accept the fact that some things are just beautiful and they are the way they are? You don't have to force feed people with equations and with scientific explanations to behold something beautiful and to accept that life can be a wonderful thing. Yet we're bombarded with all this science, all this pseudoscience, and they're basically putting square pegs into round holes, where there's no need for it. You were saying it earlier. Science is just a made-up language, and it is. It's all there to explain phenomena, but I don't need my phenomena explained. I can see that water is flat, and I know that it can't curve around a ball. And if you want to invent gravity,
or for instance, if you like seeing a straight angle, okay, a straight angle, something like that. Why is that necessarily 90 degrees? Who decided that this is like 90? I don't see any the digit 90 is over here, okay? That it's like degrees, or all kinds of like examples like that shows you that the science is coming to give you a reflection on the reality, a language, a good language, but it can't like but it does like have two horrible things, okay? First of all, it doesn't cover the entire aspect of reality, okay? There's things in science that you can't define, like emotions, okay? All kinds of like inner experiences, things like that you can't define in science. And on the other hand, it's been corrupted by in years and years by people who have certain agendas. So those are the two things that kind of like corrupted the science and can't give him the monopoly that he now possesses about describing reality. Now, that's the thing that this crisis, this COVID crisis, is actually dealing with. Okay, science is telling you, I'm here to define you what reality is regarding this this virus or whatever. Okay,
right.
and you have to accept it. This is now the law that you have to accept the reflection that he's giving you about this reality, as the total truth. Okay, and this is the world that we are facing in right now. Is this science perception on reality, where is gonna take over on the minds of people, okay, and they're gonna completely, agreeing with it. I think that the real battleground is in the space between our couch to the television, and they're like bombarding us with all kinds of horrible weapons and fears and whatever. And if we are just we're gonna say, oh, we can't take it anymore. Whatever he's saying is right. We're gonna lay like zombies on the back of the couch, and we're gonna let them keep being bombarded. But I think that the minimal thing that you can do, I'm not talking about doing like online shows or going to protest, but just get up from your couch and yell back on the television and tell them, "You liars, okay? You liars. This is not the reality that reflecting." Yeah.
Yeah. The only problem with that is that you need someone to be awake to do that. And this is the thing that we have to, certainly here in the UK, we have to understand one thing, and that is that the majority of people have bought into the mainstream narrative. The majority of people. So it's not like we're trying to get people to do something about it, but they're just too lazy. The fact is, then it's not that they're too lazy, it's the fact that they're not even awake to the fact that they should be doing something about anything, because they're going along with the official narrative, which is, for example, right now, we have a deadly virus that changes its variant every few days. It's gone from a Brazilian one to a South African one. Now we're back to a new Brazilian one here in the UK, by the way. For some reason, Brazil hasn't been used for a while, so let's use the Brazilian strain. And
the carnival.
Yeah, the carnival, and and it will just continue like that until people see behind the lies and see the truth. Nothing will happen, and this is the problem. So so for example, if we do a demonstration and we say to people, come on, we're the 99%, as it were. Let's wake up. Well, actually, we're not the 99%. We're the 99% of the 1% that are awake. But there is still the big chunk of society that are not awake, or they refuse to be awake because they're either looking after their jobs, they're scared to lose their jobs, they don't want to get ostracized by their families, they don't want to lose their friends, they don't want to get out of their comfort zones, or they're just stuck in cognitive dissonance. Or they just feel like ignorance is bliss. I'd rather not know. Whatever the reasons, but there are a number of reasons why people won't open their eyes to all of this. And it's a bit like the Globe Light Tour. And here's the connection on that one. Some people said to me, well, what does it matter if the earth is round or if it's flat? Well, if you're asking me that question, then you have a lot of learning and researching to do. And you have to open your mind, because if you don't understand the implications, if one day people said, yeah, actually, we're not all spinning water ball in a vacuum of space, a vacuum that you cannot replicate on Earth anyway. So what a stupid idea that is in the first place. If you can't understand the implications of knowing the truth on a topic like the Earth, then you're never going to understand anything. And this is the battle that we have. So we have to take baby steps to get people thinking in that direction. We're already miles ahead of people in terms of our information. We're well ahead of people. We need to step it right back to those who aren't awake, I'm on about, and tell them the basic stuff. For the COVID thing, for example, look at PCR tests. Look up Carrie Mullis. Look at what he says about his own tests and why they shouldn't be used and all that sort of stuff. It's a real big issue. It's misinformation on a grand scale.
Okay, and I think that over here on the ESH News, we usually like to sum up our shows with a little bit of like optimistic words. Okay, we kind of like pour down lots of crazy thing that happens in the world right now and how people react to that. So please, Mr. Sven, give us a little bit like optimistic predictions. How things are going to turn out the right way? Do you think, in the right plot, in the right end of the story, how we like it? What can be in that scenario?
So So you're asking for an optimistic view on the future?
Yeah.
From me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
From you. Yeah. You.
yeah. Okay. Well, listen. At the end of the day, right? And I don't want to simplify it too much, but then again, some of the most genius things in life are the simplest, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I think that if people just concentrate on their basic stuff, which is themselves for a kickoff, make sure that everybody's spiritual fabric, I keep talking about it, but it's true. If that's in place and you're happy with yourself, and you make sure that you're doing the right things in your life, keeping your side of the street clean, as it were, then good things will tend to happen to you. Whatever the nonsense is that's going on around you, we have to start understanding that you have to gain a bit of acceptance around it all. Now, acceptance doesn't mean in agreement with. I'm not condoning what's going on, or anything like that. But what I'm saying is I have to know what I can change and what I can't change. And I guess it's a bit like the serenity prayer. There's a very famous prayer that talks about, the courage to change the things I can, or accepting the things I cannot change, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that is a good point to work off, that, I can't do much about bus drivers acting stupid towards me if I get on their bus with no face mask. So how do I turn it into self-preservation, making my life for myself and my loved ones as easy as possible in these crazy times, planting a seed here or there, if that's possible, of course, but life goes on, is the point I'm making. Life does go on, and there is no point in worrying about something that hasn't happened yet. Don't read the media too much and what they talk about, because it goes up and down and changes every 5 minutes anyway. Politicians, we know that they're compulsive liars. That's why they do politics. That's their job. It's a theatre piece. That's all it is. Nothing more, nothing less. They're all handled. They all have script writers. They all have speech writers. We call them spin doctors here in the UK. They all have them. That's their role. It's supposed to baffle people. Bullshit baffles brains, as the saying goes, right? So I would implore people to just crack on with life and just, always remember to just do the right things. Remember that word love, but in the good sense, love, love thy neighbor, but be there for people, do the right thing, be kind to each other. Don't lie. If you're not too sure about a topic, look it up properly. Don't pretend you know something if you don't know. If I don't know what I'm talking about, I'll say I don't know, and I'll go and look it up. Or I'll talk to somebody who knows best. Stay in touch with close friends who are of the same mind. Because what other options do we have? Apart from going mad in our own minds and worrying too much about what could happen, going through all sorts of scenarios. Well, scenarios they're not gonna help anybody. So we have to continue.
Yeah, and we have to. I guess we can create a well produced content on the web, like we're doing at this moment.
For example.
Yeah.
Well,
Good.
everybody has an opportunity to do something about things in general. And there could just be little things. You go out and go for walks and do that sort of stuff. If you're feeling strongly about it, like yourself or myself, then try your hand at maybe doing a channel, or try a hand at going around and talking to people on the street. People can do it on their own. Have a chat with the local shopkeeper. Talk to passers-by. What's your views? If you see someone walking past you who's not wearing a mask, ask them. I'm just out of interest. Why aren't you wearing a mask? Because I'm not either. I just wanted to get your idea on it. There's nothing wrong with talking to people. There's no law that says you can't talk to anybody on the street. They'll do little things like that. It can be done. I've done it, so it can be done. I know it can be done. I know people who do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. So, Sven, any kind of last words for ESH News fan and this show? I personally want to say that I enjoy this show a lot, and really enjoyed your perspective and hearing these new things. And so, any kind of goodbye words for our viewers?
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you for having me on there. I remember right back in the day, the first time I nearly spoke to you. You were in touch with Lisa on the Globe Lighter. I remember we were driving through Norway, I think, at the time. I remember you having a conversation with her. And I remember back then thinking, oh, yeah, I'd like to sort of get to know Nia and speak to him, because I could see that you were quite active with your channel and stuff. And I always found that fascinating, because I've never really been a content creator. I've only just started doing it now, really, myself. So I'd like to just show my gratitude. Thank you for allowing me this platform to come on. Also for me to be able to thank everybody else who supported my channel, which is Sven Pillêt, just like how it's written on YouTube.
Sub.
Yeah, and you know, and we all need each other in this one. We all need to support each other in this one. You know, we're going to have challenging times ahead, but that's what, you know, there are always solutions, not problems, you know, always. And so I look forward to it as an opportunity to move forward, get to know more new people and good people, this is the good thing about all of this. It gets the good people together, and that's good. That's very promising for the future. So thank you to everybody who's going to watch this, and near to you as well, a special thanks from me.
Cool. Thank you, and have a good evening, and hoping to see you soon here on ESH News. It will happen.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.